Happy Monday and Happy New Year. It's time to catch up on the box office. Dan Murrell, we've been gone for a while. You should have plenty of charts for us.
I do have lots of charts and information and everything you'd ever want to know about the holiday season. In the beginning of 2019, same year, new year, same numbers.
Movies.
Yeah, exactly.
New year, same fish man. Aquaman continues to dominate at the box office.
Yeah, we got to talk a little bit about Aquaman before the holiday break because it had opened internationally a week before. We knew that it was doing very well overseas. It is doing very well in our seas and everywhere that there are seas.
All of the seas, all of the land. We like the Aquaman. Aquaman is
really doing well. Number one at the domestic. I mean, this is not. I know there was I saw some sentiments of people well, it's tweeting me like, well, I guess you were proven wrong. I'm like, no. I'm not surprised that it's doing well. I think it makes a lot of sense that it's doing this well.
I believe we said that it was going to make oceans of cash.
It's spectacle. It is. They have really, Warner finally figured out a way to make, we'll look at the global numbers coming up for the DCEU, but they have a true breakout global hit with this film, which is what they really, really are looking for. They've kind of had it a couple times before with the DCEU, but this one is the one that is now going to be the king of the universe, the top of the pack.
Yeah, he's holding that golden trident, and this is the standard bearer for them. I remember having a conversation before the holidays predicting, I think we all were, that Aquaman was going to make lots and lots of money, and that the conversation was quickly going to become, this is the new face of the DCEU, and this is what we can expect lots more of. It'll be interesting to see how that works with the plans for the rest of the Justice League.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you have a movie like this that drove domestically, it drove the holiday season. There were no huge outright flops. There were some smaller movies that really didn't do well. Unfortunately, poor Welcome to Marwen. But as far as the big budgeted ones, we're going to break down each one of them a little bit later on. But there were no huge flops so far. But Aquaman was the film that was driving the holiday box office here. So that is domestically a great sign that you have a franchise that can drive in a very competitive box office period, can still rack up grosses.
Yeah.
You also have now, as I said before, probably even more so proven that you have a worldwide franchise. As someone who wants to see at this right now from where they left in Justice League, wants to see another Henry Cavill Superman movie. I like where the character is now. As somebody who wants to see an Ezra Miller Flash film, I think this is good because this certainly, I think the talk after Justice League of complete reboot, everything's going to get scuttled, maybe keep Wonder Woman and reboot everything else. Now you have you have two movies that have done exceptionally well. You have a couple of other ones that have done pretty well. Justice League, not great.
That's a complicated story, though.
That's a complicated story. So I think the idea that after this movie that you're going to sweep everything away and start over, I don't think there's going to be as much more of that talk as there might have been.
I don't think there's going to be much more of that talk at all. I think it's going to all be about how the other characters can basically follow in the footsteps of Aquaman and Wonder Woman, which is a pretty surprising conversation to have when you consider that some of the other characters are Batman and Superman.
If we were going to flash back to when Man of Steel came out in 2013, and if you're going to say, all right, at the end of 6 years when all of the movies have come out, which two characters are going to be the breakout stars of this universe? I would probably said, but Batman and Superman. Wonder Woman and Aquaman, and that's why you play the game.
And it's fun, to see, and that's exciting. So that means that they may, in fact, move forward and double down on Flash next, and give themselves a little bit of a window to redefine how they're utilizing Superman and Batman. But though, like you, I think Henry Cavill deserves another shot at it. Let's look at how the DCEU has done. DC Land of, what is it? World of DC.
Well, there's no official name. We still call it the DCEU because it's catchy until they give us.
And why not? Until they send us to jail for it. So
yeah.
So in the world.
Well, there's domestic and then there's world. So domestically, looking at how it's doing compared to the rest of the films at this point in their release, Aquaman it's running with the pack through 17 days. It's hanging right in there, right at about where Suicide Squad was. A little bit under Wonder Woman, ahead of Man of Steel. way below Batman v Superman, but that was a very front-loaded film. It had a huge opening and fell off pretty quickly. So when I say that, we'll look at this number versus the global number, when I say it's being driven largely by the worldwide box office, that's what I mean, is that it's hanging with the pack so far of the other DCEU films.
Though they'll probably swim ahead.
It will. I think ultimately what you're going to look at as far as longevity is Aquaman's longevity coming out of the holiday season going to be able to match Wonder Woman's longevity in the summer? And how will 412 million is the number that Aquaman is going to have to hit to be the highest grossing domestic film in the DCEU. I don't know if it'll hit that. I think it's going to do really well. I think it's going to be the second highest grossing film at a minimum. It's all about longevity, the end game, the legs. What are the other releases? The fins. Thank you. The fins. Is Glass going to take a big bite out of Aquaman? What effect is Captain Marvel going to have as we get into February and some of those films? Captain Marvel time, Aquaman will be pretty close to done, but you never know. It could be dollars and cents by that point.
I think other than Glass, though, there's not a ton of competition over the next month and a half, or a month roughly now that we're into
month-ish.
Almost
Yeah,
month-ish.
You got Lego Movie 2 in February. There's a few things coming out that could, muddy the water a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Glass, having said that, I think Glass is going to be another phenomenal hit. So especially in that opening weekend. But let's talk about the world.
So as you can see, to date, swimming with the pack. I'm just going to do all of the Aquaman puns that I can domestically, but let's look at DCEU worldwide grosses. This is not to date. Aquaman's is to date, but all the rest of those are final. So Aquaman is now already easily the highest grossing worldwide film in the DCEU. It has topped Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. If you're looking at non-domestic, it has the highest non-domestic gross, meaning take out the United States. Of all the rest of the world combined, Aquaman has the highest non-domestic gross of any film in the DCEU by over $140 million, which means that this movie is by far the highest grossing film worldwide outside of the United States of any other film that has been part of this franchise. That's great news for Warner Brothers because that means it is a breakout hit and it's not even close.
Yeah.
So that's good. $260 million plus gross in China. About what it's done here, it's done in China. That's great news for Warner Brothers. Again, this puts Aquaman on its own 2 feet, not tied to the Justice League. It's now its own franchise, which is not too bad.
I was looking for some kind of fish pun. It was not there for me, sadly. No. But you know what? Warner Brothers has had a great year in general. Yeah. And I think that what's been so wonderful about this year for them and for us as moviegoers is the diverse array of the types of films that have been successful for them. You have everything from Aquaman to Crazy Rich Asians to A Star is Born. These are very different films. So what I hope in the future for Warner Brothers, it means they will continue to make an interesting array of films.
Yeah.
But certainly this is good news for Walter Hamada at DC Films. And though he wasn't there in the development process, he's got to be taking this as a feather in his cap for the new direction and to be doubling down. There are lots of meetings happening about that.
Yeah, by this time next week, it's almost certain that Aquaman will become the 37th film to gross $1 billion or more, and the third DC film, not DCEU, but DC film to gross $1 billion, Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises being the other two. Yeah. Not bad company to be in.
Not too shabby for Aquaman, not too shabby for Jason Momoa, not too shabby for James Wan. Begin the speculation about how the DCEU will currently adjust to make Aquaman and Wonder Woman their leaders.
We'll see.
We'll see. It'll be pretty interesting I'm kidding. Don't yell at me, Batman and Superman lovers. I like Henry Cavill too. Sony's Escape Room overperformed a little bit. Wasn't such a hit with audiences.
Yeah, it's kind of like which side do you want to look at? It overperformed based on expectation. It came out to about $18.2 million. That's off a $9 million budget, so it doubled that budget. It had a B cinema score, which usually that's kind of like, that's not great. However, when you look at a B cinema score in comparison to what a January horror release usually gets, that's not bad.
What did do we know what the last key got? Which was this director's?
They usually are in the C minus range. I don't know exactly what the last key got, but they're generally pretty low. Sometimes you get into the D's, at least the B minuses and C plus. So for it to come out with a B, that says that audiences didn't hate it as much as they usually hate January horror films, which seems like damning with frank praise. because it is. But that does say that it might leg out just a little bit more than your average horror movie, and even still to double your budget on the first weekend. That's why they make these smaller movies come out January.
So this director did last year's first release as well, Insidious: The Last Key. So we'll see, what will he bring us next year?
Who knows?
Who knows? So Bumblebee, Mary Poppins Returns, Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse, all still in play.
All still in play. They rounded out the domestic top 5, all movies that we're going to talk about in a second, because I want to talk about them, the holiday, the worldwide, all of it in one kind of big chunk. But real quickly, the top per screen domestically was a film in its second. It's not often you see a film in its second week of limited release at the top, but it's Destroyer by Karin Kusama, starring Nicole Kidman. It came out in limited release last weekend, but because there's so many movies competing, it actually was able to take the crown this weekend. Yeah. I saw it.
I saw it as well. It's arduous to watch. I'm surprised they released it on Christmas Day.
It's not what I would think of after I, opened the gifts under the tree.
It is not a Christmas movie. I was shocked they were. I figured they must have been going for counter programming, but this weekend makes a lot more sense for this movie to do well to me, having seen it. It's a movie. I think it's an amazing, incredible performance by Nicole Kidman, but it is. And there's a lot that I like about the movie, but it's a hard movie to watch. I mean, truly, it's arduous.
It is gritty.
Yes.
It's gritty and it is intense. And Nicole Kidman has a lot of makeup on.
She sure, but I think it's a legitimately good performance, right? Really,
no, it's a good performance
too.
But the makeup is also there to sort of it's like a little highlighter on top of that.
It really is. There's a lot of makeup, although there's more makeup needed to make her look like the age that she actually is than to make her look 15 years younger than that.
It's weird.
So just let that work out.
It is very odd. Yeah. She looks like just an average person that was probably at her age.
Yeah.
Maybe a little. She's been through some
stuff. Well, a person that's had a hard life at that age.
Exactly.
But Nicole Kidman looks like she's probably 30, which is what she's playing in the younger version of herself in the film.
Yes.
And she's probably actually more towards 50 in reality, and they had to just douse her in goo in order to make her look her actual age because of Hollywood witchery and sorcery.
Witchcraft.
Cold War is a movie that I would highly recommend that everyone go see if you're going to go see one of these awards hopefuls this weekend. Also, I hear Stan and Ollie's fantastic.
Cold War, Stan and Ollie, On the Basis of Sex, which is opening wide this weekend. All three of them are right up there in the per screen average too, right behind Destroyer. This is where you see a lot of the per screens. They all came out right at Christmas time to qualify for awards, and they're all going to start expanding, and we'll see what happens. But
have you seen it yet, Cold War?
I haven't yet.
Yeah, it's fantastic. If this is the Academy Awards nominee from Poland.
Yes.
And it's really, really wonderful film. So I highly recommend that one.
It's going to win the second place to Roma Academy Award.
Yes.
Best foreign film.
Good luck. Roma happened this year.
Good luck.
Award.
Yeah. Sorry about Roma.
Sorry.
Award. Yeah.
Oh well. Roma's great.
Roma's really impressive movie too. Let's look at the world, Roth.
Let's look at the world.
So it was tough. It's tough to try to figure out worldwide holiday. So much to catch up on. So I wanted to kind of hit the bigger films that people wanted to know about. The first one being Bumblebee. Bumblebee was actually the #1 movie worldwide this weekend.
They liked it in China.
But not
as much as Michael Bay.
Not as much. Not quite as much, no. A nearly $60 million Chinese opening, though. It now has a worldwide total that's getting close to $300 million. It is the cheapest Transformers movie ever made, but at $135 million. So
Come
again,
on, little bee.
Exactly. Well,
you can do it.
I'm rooting for Bumblebee
Me
because
too.
I like that movie. I think it's a good movie. It is a lot different than the other Transformers films. Maybe people were worn out by the franchise already. Maybe this just isn't a direction that people wanted to see. It's currently at about less than half of what Transformers The Last Night pulled in worldwide when it came out. It cost a little bit less too, though, but still, it's gonna need to do a little bit more. But like I said, it is cheap. So I think with the critical goodwill and hopefully some audience goodwill, if it's able to keep going a little bit, and we'll look at how it's done as far as multiples here in the U.S. If it's able to keep going just a little bit and keep have a good second weekend in China, and pull in a respectable gross, I think there's a chance that they may say, this is a good enough start that we're going to try to build on this, as opposed to go back or go a whole other way, or who knows what. But I do hate to see it still not doing as well as the other Transformers films when it's my personal favorite of all of them.
Oh, mine too. And I think most people would agree. I think there was some confusion. I remember when I was tweeting about Into the Spider-Verse And Bumblebee. Now, Into the Spider-Verse is on my top 10 list of the year, which you'll be seeing from Dan and I later this week.
Yes. We had to catch up on a lot of stuff.
There was a lot of things.
Yeah.
But Bumblebee is really just a very sweet film that's a really good Transformers movie. And you want to see that rewarded because we want more studios to say, hey, we can make a blockbuster with a solid story. Imagine that, Dan.
Imagine that. We can always
Disney probably wants more out of its Little Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins. That was actually a pretty big movie.
It is. It is a very big movie. Yeah, Mary Poppins is another one. It's kind of like Bumblebee. You look at it and you're like, there's a lot of facets to this. It was after Aquaman, which almost another $90 million this weekend. Mary Poppins Returns was number 3. At about a little under $40 million worldwide. Right now, its worldwide total is at $250 million. It had a budget about the same as Bumblebee's. So if you're looking at worldwide gross, Bumblebee is actually outgrossing Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins is doing better domestically than Bumblebee's doing. And this is all about the Disney expectations game, this was the big Disney release at the holidays. I think the expectation game was, well, then that's going to be the movie that makes all the money. Aquaman ended up, I think, really pushing the box office maybe a little bit more than a lot of people had anticipated. And then just audience hunger for this just didn't seem to be as voracious as a lot of people thought. I thought it would do a little bit better.
I really did.
If I'm being honest.
If I'm honest, I think I was way off. I thought that Poppins, I knew that Aquaman would dominate, but I really thought that Poppins would do very, very well for Disney. And I think they've got to be feeling a little disappointed. Yeah,
I mean, it's $130 million budget, $250 million worldwide. It's got a little bit of gas left in the tank domestically, I think. But it's not going to be a massive breakout hit, and I think that might have been what they wanted, especially for a film that's in development for so long.
Yeah.
I think it'll do fine. I'm sure it'll break even after you sell off the TV and all of the ancillaries that you get with Disney and airlines and everything else. But it's not going to be like a huge, massive hit.
It's interesting to, I mean, we don't have to have the answers right now, but I am curious why this didn't seem to resonate, because even a lot of critics it really didn't resonate with necessarily.
It didn't. Critical response was divided. I liked it a lot. I didn't. It's not on my top 10 list. It wasn't like one of my favorite movies of the year or anything, but I certainly enjoyed it. A lot of critics didn't. I think that might have hurt it a little bit, that the critical response was positive, but still lukewarm, with some notable exceptions going negative. I just think that everything with this movie was a little softer than a lot of people had been anticipating, and you're seeing a little bit of that in the box office results. Yeah,
well, it's a very earnest film, and maybe there's not a lot of appetite for that, but there's a film that Disney has that's very self-referential, which there is appetite for to some degree.
Yeah.
Ralph Breaks the Internet.
Yeah, I know it might seem weird to see because it opened way back on Thanksgiving here in the U.S. So why is that on the worldwide chart? It opened in several international markets this past weekend. That's why it jumped back up into the top 5 worldwide, banked another $30 million. Looking at the numbers, it had a really big start, like a really hot start. But it's gonna be probably just about or just over the original Wreck-It Ralph domestically. It has a few more worldwide markets to roll into in the next couple months, so I think it's going to be a marginal improvement on the first film internationally, or about the same. Again, that's coming out of the gate. It looked like it was going to blow the doors off the first one.
I thought it was.
And The Grinch was a big factor that played a lot more into it than people, myself included, anticipated. And I think The Grinch muted it so much following Thanksgiving and did so well that by the time we got to Christmas, you had so much more competition that it got a little bit lost in the shuffle after a good start. So sometimes the opening weekend looks great and it doesn't go where you expected. And sometimes the opening weekend looks small. And you never know what you're going to get. And that's
you might get a Greatest Showman.
You might get a Greatest Showman. This film, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, is part of the latter, I think. It was in the top 5 this weekend, about $25 million. It has a great advantage, which is that its budget is comparative, particularly to those other 4 on the screen right there, comparatively low, right around $90 million. It has held extremely well throughout its run. It opened on the 14th, a little bit early. God. It opened well. We talked about it. It opened pretty well, but it was all about how is it going to do during the holiday. We'll see how it did here in a second. But the other thing that I don't think even the people that made it thought could possibly be a factor is that, one, the critical response has been extremely positive. Number two, especially following the Golden Globes last night, it has now unexpectedly found itself the front runner for the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, which extends its lifetime in theaters a little bit because people are going to want to seek it out, particularly after nominations come out in a couple weeks.
Well, and also, we don't know how big of a boost just the Golden Globes win might give it, because I think that for a lot of people that may have had curiosity around it and just been inundated with all of the other films, we're getting into a slower period with releases. So there's more time to catch up on things, and that gives the sort of stamp of approval that may heighten interest in Spider-Verse. Certainly, we've been tracking this and hoping that would happen and believed that it would have legs because there is such a positive response. Because if you see the film, you will probably like it. That's not everybody. But it's a really good film. And so you imagine that it will get some legs. As far as Ralph is concerned, if we get the Disney Avengers Princess movie, it's done its job, Dan Murrell.
It's worth it. It's done what it's done. But
Spider-Verse is the one we're looking to succeed because we want to see more of that.
Yeah, and
we're going to get 2 more, period.
We're going to get, we know, I mean, they're already talking about a sequel and a Spider-Women spinoff. So we're going to be looking at those. But the holiday legs, Roth, we talk about that, and especially during the holiday season, how the opening weekend is a part of the story, but less so than any part of the year is it the entire story. So I put together a little rundown of, these are movies that open from the 14th, which is when Spider-Man opened, which was pretty much open the holiday window, through the end of the year. Movies that opened at $10 million or more. When we talk about legs, you know how we always talk about, like, well, if a movie makes back 2.5 or 3 times its opening, generally you're doing pretty well. This is how movies perform during the holiday season and why openings aren't always the entire story. If you look at Mary Poppins Returns, that opened to $23 million. I know a lot of people, when it opened, said that is a really low opening for that film. And you're right, it is lower than you would anticipate, but look at the multiple. It's now made almost 6 times that multiple, the biggest multiple of any film that opened. Now, it's never apples to apples. Some movies open on Wednesday. Some movies open on Thursday. Some movies open on Tuesday.
Some movies open at such a high initial margin that it's hard to get that kind of multiple, just because it's made so much in its opening weekend.
Exactly. Like, you know, it's not like all these open on the same day, and I'm not saying this is a 100% objective comparison. This is just a general look. Mary Poppins had a great multiple. The Mule, again, opened at 17.5. It's now made over 80, 4.6 times. That was a movie that people went to, particularly older audiences went to throughout the holiday season. Bumblebee, 4.5 times multiplier. Aquaman, 3.8 times multiplier. That's great. It's particularly because it had by far the highest opening of any of them. For that to have that multiple, that's great. And then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, $35 million opening, 3.8 almost times multiplier. And I think that that's going to go up because if you look at the percentage drop week to week percentage wise, it's held as well or better than any of the other films in wide release that were also doing well. And I do think it's going to start getting some of that awards buzz. So the holiday season, the Oscar boost, the awards boost, we'll see how it does. But the holiday season is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And once again, you know, I don't know if it doesn't look like we're going to have a Jumanji or a Greatest Showman this year in the sense of like a movie that, you know, did okay, but is just going to like track forever into next year. In a surprise kind of way. Like if Aquaman does, it wouldn't surprise me because it's already, you know, it opened very well and it's already been very popular. I just mean like Jumanji and Greatest Showman were 2 movies, but Jumanji opened okay. And Greatest Showman was written off at DOA, and they both just legged it out and crushed it.
They crushed it, and there was also not oddly enough, as much as there was a Star Wars to contend with.
Exactly.
They absolutely doubly, triply crushed it, given that there was a Star Wars to contend with as well.
So,
and a significant Star Wars at that. Domestic chart, Aquaman,
this is updated from the last time we did the show, so this is a few weeks of movement. Aquaman, now the 7th highest domestic grosser of 2018. Yes, it's 2019, but there's still business being done in 2018. There's a 2019 chart too, don't worry about it. It's at number 7. It's going to jump over The Grinch pretty soon. I think it's very probable that it's going to jump over Deadpool 2, could be the 5th highest grossing film of 2018 domestically, which would I mean, if you look at that, number 1 comic book movie, number 2 comic book movie, number 3 superhero movie, number 5 comic book movie, number 7 comic book movie, number 9 comic book movie. So if you want to know what's doing well and what dropped out, it's a comic book movie.
And if you want to talk about the future of the industry and if there are going to be no more comic book movies,
2018 would say otherwise.
yes, 2018 has something to say to you. Let's look at the world.
Look at the world. Aquaman just moves up. He keeps moving up that list when you go worldwide. He's number 5. Look at that. Right under The Incredibles. Going to break $1 billion probably in the next week. Venom dropped down 1. Mission Impossible dropped down 1. Bohemian Rhapsody still hanging out there at number 8.
Best
Ant-Man
movie
and
in
the
the
Wasp. Yeah, well, that's what the Golden Globes
That's what
say.
I'm saying.
Hollywood Foreign Press says it's the best movie in the world. I know a lot of people that would disagree.
So weird. I wasn't with you guys today, but my God, those globes were bananas. Okay.
Those were weird Golden Globes. We wished you were there this morning because we were talking about it. Ant-Man and the Wasp drops off, doesn't make the cut, just right at the end of the year. Doesn't make the 2018 cut in the top 10. Oh, well, they're still doing okay. But let's look at 2019.
Let's do it.
Let's put this chart up now because it's going to be very hard for you to read. This is the worldwide box office. There's a Dragon Ball movie that I was looking up. It's being tracked for this year, even though it came out last year, but it's opening in a lot of markets this year, so I guess that's why it's in 2019. But right now, it's the highest grossing movie of 2019, Escape Room. Now that a lot of people would say, like, wait a minute, How to Train Your Dragon 3, that's a typo because that doesn't open for another 6 weeks. It opened in Australia and New Zealand this past weekend. They got How to Train Your Dragon, which is, I think, called The Hidden Kingdom.
Why do they get it so early, Dan Murrell?
I don't know, Roth Cornet.
Well,
you
it
have to
doesn't-
ask.
I have a bone to pick with you.
Yeah, so down under, if you're watching Mr. Sunday Movies and all of our friends in Australia and New Zealand, congratulations on having seen How to Train Your Dragon 3. Let us know how it is. And then 2019 domestic, an even tougher chart to read. I'll give you a second to read this.
The first movie of the year.
First and only movie of the year. The good news for Escape Room is that they'll be one of the top 10 grossing movies of the year for, at least a few
3
weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, 3-4 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Well,
put
when
that in your
does
pipe
when
and
does
smoke
Glass
it.
come out?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
But you got to fill out all 10.
You got 2.
Yeah, you got probably 2 weeks, maybe 1. We'll
Yeah.
see how Upside and all that other stuff opens this week. Speaking of this week,
Yeah.
opening wide domestically, we have A Dog's Way Home, which is
Sure.
Animals in January. Why not? We've got Replicas. That's a movie with Keanu Reeves that was filmed back in 2016, which makes perfect sense why it's opening the second weekend in January. You have The Upside, which is if you look at what it's a remake of The Untouchables, which is a French film, which is the highest grossing foreign language film worldwide of all time. It is a remake with Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart. That is opening wide this weekend here in the U.S. Obviously, phenomenally successful film internationally, but we'll see how it does here with the remake. And then On the Basis of Sex, which is the Ruth Bader Ginsburg film, that opens wide on 2,000 screens this weekend. Felicity Jones and
Armie Hammer.
That opens wide this weekend after a few weeks in limited release for its awards consideration. So,
Although it's not very much in the conversation in that regard.
It's
very
really
much
not.
at all. And it's quite a tight season this year for awards.
it is, especially in a lot of the categories in which it would be hoping to contend,
Yeah.
particularly Best Actress.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. And even the Best Picture thing, one thing we did talk about this morning that I kind of got watching the Golden Globes was I don't know if it necessarily crowned any front runners, but I think what it did was it dethroned a lot of front runners, and every race that I thought was trending one way or likely to go one way,
Didn't.
it wiped all the pieces off the board.
The one that went the way that I thought was a lock was Regina. That's
Yeah.
it.
She's the one
that's the lock.
If you're gonna lock it in, I think Best Supporting Actress
Yeah.
for Regina King is almost a lock.
That feels like a lock, and everything else feels incredibly wide open.
I don't
at
know
this
where
point.
anything
I
else
just don't
is
know
going
where
to
it's
go
going to
this
go.
year.
Yeah.
Even director, picture, actor, actress, no
Yeah.
clue. Couldn't tell you.
If Gaga had won, I could predict the trajectory
momentum
on
is
that.
going,
And
yeah.
A Star Is Born, which in another year I think would have done a sweep.
Yeah.
But boy, it's a tough one to call this year.
Well, and then not only does The Star Is Born not win, but the one movie that you're just like, well, that'll never win the Oscar for Best Picture.
Bohemian Rhapsody
is the one that wins.
Is the one that wins. And it wins for Best Drama
When it's a musical.
when it's a musical.
Clearly.
And the musical, oh, you know what? Don't get me started.
There are no front runners. Everything is crazy.
It was so befuddling. Although I will say, I think that Bohemian Rhapsody winning Best Picture was an outlier Globes thing. From those 80 people that are in the Hollywood Foreign, we are not going to see
And
that.
they love Queen.
And they love Queen. Well, we all love Queen.
Yeah.
The movie's doing incredibly well internationally. It's a monster internationally. I like it. I'm not saying I don't like Bohemian Rhapsody and I don't think Rami Malek was great. He was. But that was insane given the level of competition from the other films.
I think it legitimized Rami Malek as a Best Actor contender.
Big time contender.
And this is the kind of clip that we're gonna run back the day after the Oscars and say, ha ha ha, doesn't Dan look stupid? I don't think Bohemian Rhapsody is a legitimate shot to win Best Picture at the Oscars.
Absolutely not, and we will both look equally stupid
Yes.
if that's the case. Our Golden Globes predictions, frankly, the only one we nailed was Regina King. So, although you said that the Glenn Close could maybe unseat Gaga, there you go.
I did advocate that Glenn Close could be the sneaky win because she's great in that movie.
As a matter of fact, she's also Glenn Close.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you have that to contend with as well.
Exactly.
But we'll see where all of this goes and where the box office. We just went into award zone right here on the box office. That's okay. We'll see where all of it goes in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, although a scheduling note, because the schedule's weird for the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
I have to take a trip out of town, so there will be no charting next week. I'll be out of town next week, so no charting next week. And then the week after that is the Monday is a holiday here in the U.S.
Right.
Martin Luther King Day. So charting will be on Tuesday in 2 weeks, and then in 3 weeks we'll be back on schedule. So no charting next week. The week after that we're on Tuesday. And then we're back on Mondays. Sorry for the change. It happens. What are you gonna do?
Life happens, you know.
Life happens.
And so do the movies.
Yes, they do.
Let us know what you think of them, and we will be talking about them and the schedule that Dan just said that I don't remember 2 minutes later.
Thanks for watching.